Citroen has earned an enviable reputation for its people carriers, and the Space Tourer sits at the top of that family tree. Though based on the brand's medium-sized dispatch van, it also shares its EMP2 platform with the French maker's C4 Picasso MPV, and that, along with sophisticated suspension, means a class-leading standard of ride. This model's running cost efficiency also sets a fresh class standard, and there's a wider variety of seating permutations than most rivals can offer. Tick the right boxes, and your Space Tourer could take as many as 9 people. It's all been very thoroughly thought through.
Citroen has quite a history of producing people carriers, but it's interesting that looking back over the years, there's been a notable lack of many really big ones, MPVs that are suitable for business use or really large families. Here's a contender that puts that right, the Space Tourer. Prior to the arrival of this model, the most sizable MPV your Citroen dealer could offer you was the Grand C4 Picasso, a model spacious enough in its segment, but a car not really designed around the needs of 7 adults. Even large segment people carriers like Ford's Galaxy and Volkswagen's Citroen struggle in that regard if the people in question come with luggage, as indeed did the models that Citroen once offered to compete against those cars. The Synergy that was sold between 1995 and 2003, and the C8 that replaced it and was produced until 2010. Ultimately, if you need something properly spacious in this segment, then passenger car-based underpinnings won't really cut it. Instead, you'll need something LCV-based with the boxy proportions of a van. Something like this. Sure enough, the Space Tourer is indeed based on a commercial vehicle, the brand's third-generation dispatch van. Now, we've seen dispatch-based passenger-carrying Citroens before, but they've been utilitarian minibus models aimed at business users. This one has developed as a much more car-like contender, and it shares its design with 2 direct rivals, Peugeot's Traveller and Toyota's ProAce Verso. All 3 of these MPVs are primarily aimed at the 2 other van-based people carriers that dominate this super large segment of the market, Volkswagen's Caravelle and the Mercedes V-Class. Both models that, in theory, ought to be fairly easy targets for new entrants in the sector. Although the VW and the Merc are of a size that would take the 9-seat configuration that many potential buyers might like, the Caravelle is limited to 7 seats and the V-Class to 8. Plus, in both cases, there's a pretty high asking price to pay for ownership. In producing an alternative, it might look as if all you have to do is glam up a medium-sized van, add some plush seats and give it an appealing sticker price. As brands like Ford and Hyundai have found, though, there's a bit more to it than that. Customers in this segment want proper passenger car technology and real car-like engineering. This Citroen, we're told, can provide that, offer appealing prices and, crucially, in its most versatile form, seat up to 9 people. Sounds promising, doesn't it? Let's put this model to the test. Now, we won't beat around the bush here. Large MPVs developed from vans are usually pretty turgid to drive and firm of ride. However, there are grounds for optimism in that regard when it comes to this one. Yes, it is based on a dispatch LCV, but that vehicle in turn uses the same platform as a Citroen car, specifically the C4 Picasso, a model that's one of the smoothest riding and most refined contenders in its class. So this Citroen is an MPV that's based on a van that's built on an MPV. Simple. Well, all right, it's not actually that simple. Drill down into the detail and you discover that only the front part of the EMP2 platform in question is Picasso-based. The rear is more van-like, as it needs to be in order for this model to carry loads of up to 1,400 kilos. The purpose-designed rear axle and suspension that facilitate this will usually, on this type of vehicle, leave things feeling unyieldingly firm over the bumps. Not here, though. To make the ride properly car-like, the designers developed springs for this model that feature variable levels of stiffness to suit the level of load that's being carried. And in addition, the shock absorbers are load sensitive and feature what Citroen calls a passive system that adjusts springing and damping as required depending on the road surface. The result of all this ought to make this Citroen Space Tourer and its Peugeot Traveller and Toyota ProAce Verso design counterparts more supplely suspended than any other super large MPVs in the segment. And on the move, you feel that immediately. Now, you might think that rival models like Volkswagen's Caravelle and the Mercedes V-Class have a slightly more, well, upmarket image, but there's nothing very upmarket about the way that people carriers like that crash through tarmac tears or jolt you over high-speed humps. This Citroen corners slightly better than its competitors too, though inevitably there's still plenty of body roll if, rather unwisely, you start to throw the thing around. If you can ignore both that and the slightly vague steering and find yourself absolutely having to push on, then you'll also find that there's more grip and traction than an MPV of this kind would normally offer. It all means that at the wheel of this people carrier, you can make controlled, steady progress without necessarily overreacting on the brake pedal at the first sight of a tight bend in the road. And if you add in a commandingly high driving position, the result is a vehicle that on the move feels smaller and more wieldy than its outward dimensions would suggest. Testers who found the sheer size of a Caravelle or a V-Class quite daunting were, we found, much more easily able to acclimatise to a Space Tourer when they're dealing with narrow country lanes or squeezing through gaps in traffic. A tight turning circle of between 11.3 and 12.9 metres, depending on body style, makes town driving and parking simpler too. And low-speed manoeuvring is further aided by glassy rearward visibility, also the standard rear parking sensors and the optional Park Assist 180 reversing camera. Plus, this Citroen's 1.9 metre roof height is low enough to allow it to fit under car park barriers, so you don't have to search out alternative places to leave the car when you go off shopping, or get stuck in with the trucks if you ever use the Channel Tunnel. You'll want to know about engines. Well, they're all diesel fueled, of course, and feature the brand's efficient Blue HDI technology. A 95 bhp 1.6 litre unit kicks things off and can be ordered with either 5-speed manual transmission or a 6-ratio automated ETG6 efficient tronic gearbox, which does away with the clutch pedal but can be rather jerky to drive unless you lift off between changes. Whatever transmission you choose with this baseline power plant, though, suggests you might find it a touch underpowered for an MPV that weighs in at nearly 1.6 tonnes even before you start to load it up with anyone. There's a relatively modest 210 newton meters of torque with this engine, or 240 newton meters if you get it paired with that ETG6 auto box. But either way, rest to 62 miles an hour takes a lengthy 15.9 seconds on the way to a top speed of just 90 miles an hour. Plus, in this guise, a Space Tourer can only tow a brake trailer of up to 1,800 kilos in weight. With every other variant, that figure rises to 2,300 kilos. It's better then to install something a bit pokier beneath the bonnet of this Citroen, possibly the same 1.6 litre unit in its 115 bhp form, in which guise torque rises to 300 newton meters and the performance figures improve to 13.4 seconds and 99 miles an hour. The resulting package, only offered with manual transmission, will feel more flexible in everyday driving, it'll be less stressed on the motorway, and will even provide lower emissions and better combined cycle fuel economy in comparison to that 95 bhp variant in manual form. We think, though, that the ideal blend of performance and economy is probably represented by the power plant we're trying here, the 2-litre Blue HDI 150 unit. Again, it's a manual-only option, but that's no hardship as the controls are light to operate even when you're stuck in slow-moving city jams. Find an open road and this model delivers 370 newton meters of easy pulling power, 0 to 62 miles an hour in 11 seconds and a top speed of 106 miles an hour. More importantly, this variant deals with long distances in an easy and relaxed manner, not forcing you to have to drop out of 6th gear on multi-lane roads. It's all enough to make the final engine option probably unnecessary. The unit in question is a 180 bhp version of the same 2-litre power plant, but it does have the advantage in that it comes mated to a much smoother design of automatic gearbox, the PSA Group's more sophisticated EAT6 transmission system. Whichever engine you choose, you'll find standards of refinement are acceptable, although not especially exemplary. Citroen claims that absorbent materials have been liberally used around the cabin to try and keep noise levels in check. Progress is certainly not as hushed as it would be in Citroen's smaller Grand C4 Picasso MPV, but by the standards of the class, there's not too much to complain about. If you like the idea of a bit of extra peace of mind in slippery conditions, then it's well worth considering the option of the brand's clever grip control system. This alters ESP settings and throttle response to offer maximum traction when you're trying to deal with mud or snow or slippery downhill tracks. Look at the class leaders in the super large van-based MPV segment, and it's clear that a lot of effort has been put in to distance the designs in question from their LCV underpinnings, which is why Citroen has put so much work in here to create the smart and actually quite attractive silhouette of this Space Tourer model. You certainly wouldn't immediately dismiss it as a dispatch van with windows. And if you add in the right wheels and a careful choice of colour, you could certainly imagine a larger family parking it on their driveway with at least some degree of pride. Now here at the front, the main change in this design's move from package carrier to people mover lies in the substitution of the van model's vast black plastic lower bumper for this smarter body-coloured item. The addition of these LED daytime running light strips also give the styling a more sophisticated touch. Some things didn't need changing though. Smart twin-chromed bars flow out from the central double chevron badge into high-set headlamps that in this case feature optional xenon lighting. More importantly, this Space Tourer shares the same light, stiff EMP2 platform of its commercial counterpart, a development of the underpinnings that are also used by the brand's C4 Picasso MPV. In profile, of course, the van-based origins are more obvious, but the minimal overhangs, the vast glazed area and these large body-coloured door mirrors give the shape a smarter look that's nicely set off by these optional 17-inch alloy wheels. The 1.9 metre height of that long flat roof is important. It means this model can fit under normal car park height restrictions. And the length is critical too. Don't automatically assume that a super large MPV like this one has to be super long from bonnet to rear bumper. One of the body style options with this model is a relatively compact 4.6 metre long XS body shape that actually measures in at around 250mm shorter than car-derived MPVs like Ford's Galaxy or Volkswagen Chiron. Most Space Tourer buyers, though, will want the extra interior room of this 4.95 metre long M version, plus there's also a 5.3 metre long XL option if you really want to supersize things. I move to the back, and as you'd expect, the vertically stacked lights flank a tailgate rather than the twin side hinge doors you get on a dispatch van. This one's been cleverly designed so that on certain versions this glass section can be raised separately, so you can throw in small bags without having to raise a complete rear door. Most of the time, though, you'll be doing exactly that. A quick pull on the handle and the tailgate swings up easily, and if it's wet, its sheer size gives you good protection from the rain. The low load sill makes it easy to get even heavy cases into this boot space, and this tough plastic protection strip sits flush with the floor, so it makes it easy to slide weighty items in and out. A couple of tie-down hooks are sunk into that protector, and there's a portable torch set into the sidewall on some variants. It's a very neat touch. Now, the space you get here with all 3 rows of seats in place obviously varies depending on the body style that you've chosen. With this mid-range M body shape, there's 627mm of length from the back of the 3rd seating row to the tailgate, which means you get 640 litres of cargo space up to the level of the low bay cover, or as much as 900 litres if you were to load up to the roof. To give you some perspective, that's more than double the amount of room you'd have with a more car-like large MPV, like a Ford Galaxy or a Volkswagen Citroen. Now, if you're carrying 3 rows of passengers, that will be enough to make the difference between needing a roof box or a small trailer and being able to take everyone's luggage actually inside the vehicle. With the most compact XS Space Tourer body style, things would obviously be a little bit more restricted there. You'd be looking at 280 litres of luggage space with all 3 rows of seats in place. And at the other extreme, with the top XL body shape, you'll have an absolutely enormous 1,060 litres to play with up to the parcel shelf level, or up to 1,500 litres if you were to load up to the roof. A lot of the time, of course, you'll be using this Citroen with only 5 seats in place. Now, if on this M model we fold the third row seat backs down onto their bases, we'll increase loading capacity up to 1,100 litres or 1,950 litres if we load it to the roof height. You'll probably want to do that rather than taking the third row seats out entirely, as it's pretty heavy and there's the hassle of having to find somewhere to store the thing. However, if you do that, as much as 1,700 litres of space is created up to parcel shelf level, or up to 2,550 litres if you load up to the roof. Again, think in terms of a little less than that with an XS model, or a lot more with an XL variant, which, with the third row taken out, could offer up to 3,100 litres of capacity up to roof level. So finally, let's cover the capacity you'd get when you only need the front 2 seats. In this M model, with second and third row backrests folded onto their bases, you would have 2,000 litres of space up to parcel shelf level and 3,000 litres up to roof height. If you were to entirely take the second and third row seating out, those figures would each rise by 1,200 litres. So to give you an idea of ultimate carriage potential across the Space Tourer range, in an XL model with just driver and front seat passenger in place and all the rear seats removed, the total potential capacity would be a removal van like 4,900 litres, and that's a lot more than you get in many sizable vans. Enough on luggage space though. What's this Citroen like for people? Well, let's start up front, open up the wide driver's door and step up behind the wheel to find out. Now, regardless of whether 2 or 3 people are going to be accommodated here, the driver is properly looked after with height and lumbar adjustment and an armrest that gives this pure captain's chair feel, from which you can enjoy a more commanding view of the road than you'd get from many large SUVs. In fact, the only issue when it comes to all-round visibility lies with these front A-pillars. They're really rather thick, so you have to peer around them occasionally when you're pulling out of tighter junctions. This particular model is a business-trimmed variant, which means that there's the no-cost option of the dual front passenger bench that would normally be fitted in a dispatch van. Now, here, as you can see, that has been taken up. The middle-seated person will obviously be slightly restricted in terms of stretch-out space, but because the gear stick has been taken from its conventional position on the floor and mounted in this extended section of the lower dash, an adult could cope here, provided the journey in question wasn't too long. There's less restriction if you opt for the ETG6 semi-automatic model, because there the gear stick is mounted off the steering wheel. The fascia's focal point is found with this centrally situated 7-inch colour touchscreen, the most sophisticated we've come across in any Citroen so far. It includes a mirror screen feature, so you can duplicate your smartphone's display onto the monitor via either the Apple CarPlay or the MirrorLink Android Auto systems. Plus, you can activate compatible apps like Parkopedia, Fuel, Weathercrave and Rock Scout. Many owners will want to broaden the capability of this monitor by adding in features like the Citroen Connect nav system and the Park Assist 180 reversing camera. Fortunately, this monitor doesn't also control the ventilation and the air conditioning in the way that it does in Citroen's smaller Grand C4 Picasso MPV. Those controls, as you can see, are further down. It means that on a Space Tourer, you don't have to go jabbing around on the touchscreen every time you want to, say, switch from the stereo to get a warming blast on your feet. Looking around, there's nothing about this cabin that feels utilitarian or especially van-like, which is impressive since at-the-wheel differences between this Space Tourer and the Dispatch LCV are really only limited to minor things like this mid-level dashboard trim strip, some bright work around the 4 air vents and the stitched leather covering for the multifunction steering wheel. The 2 clear dials you view through that 3-spoke wheel are pretty much the same too. The gauge is separated by a trip computer display that can include a digital speedometer and incorporates a welcome standard coffee break alert feature that advises drivers to take a break after 2 hours of uninterrupted motoring. It's a really simple little extra feature that other brands really ought to copy. Now, a quick word about cabin storage. All models get this cubby on top of the dashboard. This is lidded on plusher versions, but you have to have gone for the private buyer orientated feel level of trim for this area to be refrigerated and therefore more ideal for things like drink cans and chocolate. Rather more annoyingly, you also need a feel model if you want a glove box, though where that feature is fitted, the space inside is compromised, as is so often on French cars, by an awkwardly shaped fuse box. What else? Well, the door bins can easily swallow a 1.5 litre water bottle. There are cup holders on both sides of the dashboard, and in the middle of the fascia there's this small open cubby where you can stash your mobile phone close to the power and the USB sockets. And finally, we'll tell you that if you've gone for this dual front passenger bench seat, then you'll find there's a useful storage area beneath it. So, time to move into the second row, which, as on all van-based models, is accessed by a sliding side door. Now, the news that this one can be electrically operated isn't unusual in the segment, but the fact that it can be activated by a hands-free mechanism very definitely is. Now, this feature is optional on Feel models as part of an easy entry pack. And the idea is that if you're approaching the Citroen key in pocket and laden down with shopping bags, then a wave of your foot underneath the vehicle will activate the system and slide the door back. Now, unfortunately, the sensors that work this setup are located under the rear bumper, not at the side of the car. Now, this means that if you're approaching your Space Tourer from the front and you want to use this feature, then you have to walk past the doors you want to access before you can open them, which does seem a bit counterintuitive. Here in the second row, where you get ample knee, shoulder and headroom, there's a 3-person rear bench that'll have a 60-40 split in it, provided you've taken up the option of having a third seating row behind. Now, on a Feel model, the seats are mounted on rails, so you can slide them backwards and forwards, although not individually. The middle seat will be joined to one of the outer ones. Now, we can't show you that here because this is a business spec model, and in this, guys, all the rearward chairs in a Space Tourer have to be fixed to the floor. In a Feel model, you would get upholstery that would feel a little smarter, Yumi cloth trim rather than this slightly less plush feeling mica cloth finish. Plus, in a Feel variant, passengers in this part of the car would also benefit from standard niceties like seat back mounted folding tray tables, side window blinds and ceiling mounted air conditioning vents. A final Feel selling point might lie in the fact that if you go for that variant and take up the option of the neat 2-part panoramic glass roof that your dealer will be very keen to tell you about, those ceiling vents will be mounted on a neat aircraft-style panel running down the centre of the roof. Now, let's see what it's like in the optional third row of this Space Tourer. The outer passenger side seat lifts and tilts forward to aid access, and that's something that's further aided by the provision of a higher roofline than you'd find in something like a Citroen or a Galaxy. And once you are in, you'll be reminded just why medium-sized vans make such a great starting point for a properly large, family-sized MPV. Instead of being crammed in cattle class as you would be in even the largest car-based people carriers, there's more than enough space here for arms, legs and heads. And just as importantly, there's also a good view out through these large windows, and that's not always the case with 7-seat MPVs and SUVs. This gives this rearmost part of the Space Tourer an airy feel, while the slightly raised base here means that your view forward encompasses, well, just a little more than the head of the person in front. There's also storage space for small items or drinks. So, can this Citroen Space Tourer really give you more than the German contenders in the super large MPV segment while costing thousands less? Well, let's see. Now, there's a price band ranging in the £28,000 to £35,000 bracket, and within it you get a choice of 3 body lengths: the compact XS size, the mid-range M body style and the XL variant. Most private buyers will probably start by looking at the XS model and then consider whether it's worth finding the £700 premium that's necessary to upgrade to the M-sized variant. From there, you'll have to find a further £700 if you want the longest XL body style. Now, if you're still with me, I'll try and clarify the Space Tourer range structure for you. And that's something you'll need to get your head around if you're to order the right version. OK, so there are 2 trim levels: Feel, which is aimed at private customers, and Business, aimed at commercial users. Now, in each case, this Citroen will come as standard with 5 seats arranged in the kind of format you'd expect from a large MPV, 2 at the front and a 3-person bench in the middle. Now, it's at this point that you'll have some choices to make. On a Feel model, it's fairly simple. You'll be offered the option of paying just over £1,000 more in order to make this Citroen into an 8-seater, thanks to the addition of a 60/40 split-folding third-row seating bench. Here, though, we have a business spec model, and in this case, the seating choice options are slightly different. Now, again, you start off with a 5-seat layout, from which point, with any of the 3 body shapes, you can pay your dealer £500 more to get a solid 3-person bench seat fitted in the third row. Business buyers who avoid the smallest XS body style can alternatively get this third row bench with a 60/40 split, although that raises the cost of having that extra row up to £700. Now, you'll also need to know that exclusive to business spec models is the no-cost option of specifying a van-like 3-person bench seat at the front. Go for that along with the extra third row and you'll be able to take up to 9 people in this version of this Citroen. All well and good. The downside, though, to ordering your Space Tourer with business spec trim lies in the fact that the second and third row seats don't slide backwards and forwards on rails as they do in the Feel version. The chairs have to be fixed to the floor. You'll get slightly nicer seat upholstery on Feel models too. Got that? Right, let's move on to engines. Now, there's a choice of 4 Blue HDI diesels, 2 1.6-litre units developing either 95 or 115 bhp, and a 2-litre power plant offering either 150 or 180 bhp. Go for the entry-level 95 bhp unit in the smallest XS body style, and your dealer will give you the option of paying £780 more to upgrade from a conventional manual gearbox to ETG6 piloted transmission. That's essentially a kind of manual gearbox without a clutch. Choose this engine with either of the 2 larger body styles, though, and you have to have the self-shifting ETG6 transmission option. In the middle of the model lineup, the 115 bhp and 150 bhp engines that most buyers will probably choose only come with manual transmission, and if your preference is for the 150 bhp unit we're trying here, you'll need to avoid the smallest XS body style. The top 180 bhp diesel power plant only comes in the largest XL body shape. It can only be ordered with business trim, and it only comes with automatic transmission. Those then are the Space Tourer facts, but we need to put them into some kind of perspective. Essentially, you're paying around £5,000 more for this model than you'd have to find for a version of Citroen's Grand C4 Picasso MPV with a comparable engine. But in return, you're getting far more luggage carrying capacity, nearly twice as much with the first 2 rows in place, for example. It's probably more relevant, though, to compare this Space Tourer model's value proposition to that of large MPVs that are limited by the fact that they use passenger car underpinnings rather than the commercial vehicle platform in place in this case. Here, we're thinking of models that you might well have considered before coming to this Citroen. Cars like, say, the Ford Galaxy, Seat Alhambra and Volkswagen Chiron. Now, for any of these three, you'll pay around about the same kind of money as you'd have to find for the Space Tourer in its smallest XS guise. But with the Ford, the Seat or the VW, your third-row passengers will feel more cramped than they would do in this Citroen. The luggage space advantage that this model enjoys over cars of that kind isn't huge with the XS body style, but if you pay the relatively small amount that's necessary to graduate up to this longer M body style, then it really becomes significant. The area available with all three seating rows in place, for example, being more than twice as big. Now, you simply can't take 7 people and all their luggage in a Galaxy, an Alhambra or a Chiron without resorting to something like a roof box. In the mid-sized version of the Citroen, that is quite possible. Simple as that. So, having talked about the large MPVs that aren't really comparable, let's focus on the bigger van-derived models that are. Now, for the purposes of this film, we're going to assume you want something a bit nicer than the utilitarian minibus models in the sector that target schools, clubs and airport taxi operators. And by that, we mean vehicles like Vauxhall's Vivaro Combi and Volkswagen's Transporter Shuttle that also retail at or around the £30,000 price point. Now, these really are vans with seats and windows. Slightly more car-like options are provided by two more credible Space Tourer competitors, Ford's transit-based Tourneo Custom and Hyundai's i-Load-based i800 model. Now, the Hyundai is comparable in size to this Citroen in the mid-sized M body shape, and it would save you about £5,000, but it's slightly less spacious inside, it's clunky to drive, and it would cost a lot more to run. The Tourneo Custom, sized to target the M and XL Space Tourer body styles, is a better option, but the Ford really doesn't make any attempt to be in any way car-like, and it demands a premium of around £3,000. So, what does compete most directly with this Citroen? Well, it's Peugeot Traveller and Toyota ProAce Verso design counterparts, obviously, models that, as you'd expect, are priced very comparably to this one. Now, unless you particularly prefer this Space Tourer styling, your choice between these three will probably largely come down to the deal you're offered and the location of your nearest franchise. Otherwise, the only other two options in the segment are the models that account for most sales in this part of the market, Volkswagen's Caravelle and the Mercedes V-Class. And these two models are both also targeted at the two larger Space Tourer body shapes. Of the two, the Mercedes is probably the easiest to dismiss. It's very nicely built, but it demands a price premium of around £12,000 over this Citroen, and it's slightly smaller inside too. You've really got to want the badge to pay that. The Volkswagen is a better bet, and it leads the class in terms of interior space, but looking at having to find around £7,000 more for ownership than would be required for an equivalent version of this Citroen. And that is a big price difference, particularly bearing in mind that this Space Tourer rides and handles with a more car-like demeanour. If, having considered all of this, you conclude that it is this Citroen that you really want, then you're going to need to know just what's included in the standard spec. So, let's see. Now, it only costs £170 to upgrade from business spec to field trim, but you really do get an awful lot more for that. Now, I've already mentioned the fact that in a field model, the second and third row seats slide on runners and they feature higher quality upholstery. It's finished with smart Yumi cloth trim. In addition, field variants get larger 17-inch wheels and a useful split-opening tailgate with a dark tinted glass section that opens independently so you can throw in small items without having to lift the rear door. In addition, field derivatives add in a little more luxury and practicality inside. For example, the air conditioning gets dual zone control and ceiling vents in row 2, a place in the vehicle where passengers also benefit from side window blinds and fold down aircraft style tables. Up front, further field spec additions include a child observation mirror, a glove box and refrigeration for the storage compartment on top of the dashboard, so you can keep things like drinks and chocolate cool. We should also mention items that feature on all Space Tourer models, things like daytime running lights, front fog lamps, auto headlamps and wipers, rear parking sensors and a full-size spare wheel. There's also a 7-inch touchscreen infotainment system, including a DAB radio, USB and aux in points, Bluetooth phone connectivity, and the further opportunity to link in your handset and view favourite apps via the MirrorLink and Apple CarPlay systems. Now then, what about options and extras? Well, a large number of buyers are going to want to pay the extra for the Citroen Connect nav system, which gives you 3D navigation and works with connected services like TomTom Traffic for real-time congestion updates. Plus, Citroen Connect can do things like find service station locations, update you on local fuel prices, brief you on the weather, and provide you with a local point of interest search function. If you've chosen the Feel version, then you'll also be offered an easy entry pack, and that'll give you keyless entry and start and electrically operable sliding side doors that you can activate with a wave of your foot beneath the bumper. Other key options available across the Space Tourer range that may well interest customers include smart 17-inch alloy wheels, headlamp washers, a head-up display, a panoramic glass roof, xenon headlamps, an alarm pack, and of course a tow bar. Inevitably, metallic or black paint finishes also cost extra. Now, if you live out in the sticks, you might also want to consider paying extra for the grip control system. This setup alters the ESP settings and the throttle response to offer maximum traction in different conditions, such as mud, snow and slippery downhill sections. As for hazardous parking terrain, well, adding in front parking sensors and or the Park Assist 180 rear view camera would certainly be a helpful move. In both cases, you also get the feature in question bundled up with a blind spot monitoring system that, on the move, will warn you if you're about to dangerously pull out to overtake. If you want more in terms of extra cost electronic safety features of that sort, then there's the option of a safety pack that gives you a lane departure warning system, smart beam headlamps that dip themselves at night, a driver attention alert system that warns you if the electronics sense you're getting drowsy, and speed limit recognition that pictures road signs you pass and displays them on the dash. Now, if you want to go even further and you've gone for a Feel model, you'll be offered a Drive Assist pack with 3 additional features: adaptive cruise control, which automatically regulates your cruising speed, collision alert, which warns you if you're getting too close to the car in front, and active safety brake, which scans the road ahead as you drive for potential collision hazards, and it can automatically brake the car if one's detected and you don't respond to the warnings. More common safety features fitted to all Space Tourer models include the usual electronic assistance for braking, traction and stability control, along with hill start assist to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. Now, we also like the standard coffee break alert feature that advises drivers to take a break after 2 hours of uninterrupted motoring. And there are rear seat Isofix child seat mountings and a tyre pressure monitoring system. You get twin front lateral and head thorax airbags too, although curtain bags cost extra. As a result of all this safety provision, the Euro NCAP testers gave this Space Tourer a full house 5-star rating. Now, true, as part of the tests, this model's pedestrian protection score of 64% wasn't anything to write home about, but elsewhere, this Citroen's results were all pretty impressive. 78% for safety assist features, 87% for adult protection, and 91% for child protection. We'll cut to the chase immediately here. The Space Tourer sets a new standard for running cost efficiency when it comes to super large MPVs of this kind. Indeed, we'd be calling it class leading in this regard, were it not for the fact that exactly the same design with exactly the same advantages is shared by its 2 most direct rivals, Peugeot's Traveller and Toyota's Proace Verso. There are 2 obvious reasons for the relative frugality and cleanliness on offer here. One lies with the PSA Group's efficient Blue HDI diesel technology, and the other is down to this model's relatively light weight. Let's start with that. Other super large van-based MPVs in this sector are extremely heavy, and there's no other way to put it. A Mercedes V-Class, for example, is at least 2.1 tonnes in curb weight. A Volkswagen Caravelle is around 2.3 tonnes. Now, in contrast, a Space Tourer tips the scales at between 1,526 and 1,719 kilos, depending on the engine, transmission and body style combination you choose. Now, that inevitably is going to make quite a difference, even before you start adding in the advantages of this model's Blue HDI engine technology. Blue HDI engines use a clever three-step after-treatment system that's designed to better eliminate the 4 nasty pollutants that diesel units usually put out, namely unburnt hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides and particulates. The first stage sees the unwanted hydrocarbon and carbon monoxide elements converted into harmless water and carbon dioxide. Now, in the second stage, the nasty nitrogen oxide gets converted into water too via a selective catalytic reduction process using a urea and water solution called AdBlue, though you need to get that mixture topped up every 9,300 miles. Finally, in the third step, a particulate emissions filter eliminates virtually all particulates at a stroke. The result of all this is industry-leading diesel technology that many manufacturers are struggling to copy. It's also worth mentioning that provided you avoid the least powerful diesel engine and manual gearbox combination, all variants come fitted with an S&S start and stop system that cuts the engine when you don't need it, when you're stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. So let's get to the figures. The most efficient option in the range is provided by the 115 bhp version of the 1.6-litre HDI variant, which with manual transmission returns 54.3 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 137 grams per kilometre of CO2. The lesser 95 bhp model manages 51.4 miles per gallon and 144 grams per kilometre in manual form, or 52.3 miles per gallon and 139 grams per kilometre when it's fitted with the ETG6 semi-automatic gearbox. Here we're trying the 2-litre Blue HDI engine in the 150 bhp form, combined with the mid-sized M body style. Now, this combination produces a combined cycle figure of 53.3 miles per gallon and 139 grams per kilometre of CO2. Figures will fall by around 5% if you specify the larger XL body style. At the top of the range, the auto-only Blue HDI 180 variant manages 47.9 miles per gallon and 155 grams per kilometre. Now, to give you some perspective on those readings, I'll tell you that this 150 bhp model will take you about 8 miles further on every gallon and will put out about 22 grams per kilometre less of CO2 than a comparable Mercedes V-Class or Volkswagen Caravelle. Anything else you should know? Well, the Space Tourer will need a scheduled service halt once every 20,000 miles. And if you want to ensure the cost of these stops don't come as a surprise, there are Citroen servicing packages where you can pay in advance for those regular checks. They range from 12 to 60 months and they cover you for 10,000 up to 100,000 miles. When you sell the vehicle on, the balance of these deals goes with the vehicle to the next owner. A 3-year, 100,000 mile warranty is standard with every Space Tourer, and also included is Citroen Assistance breakdown cover for the whole of the UK and Europe. You'll want to know about residual values. Well, independent experts reckon that this Space Tourer will retain between 38 and 39% of its original value after the usual industry standard 3-year, 60,000 mile ownership period. Now, that is pretty close to the kind of standard setting figures you get in this class from a Volkswagen Caravelle. Insurance groupings start at 11E for the 95 bhp model, they rise to 15E for the 115 bhp variant and are pitched at 21D for this 2-litre 150 bhp derivative. However, it should also be noted that a business spec model like this one, specified with 9 seats, would be classed as a minibus and would therefore need a specialist insurance policy, even if you plan to run it as a private car. The Citroen Space Tourer is a welcome addition to the largest segment of the MPV market. Its good looks and smart interior give it instant appeal, while the versatility of choosing from 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9 seat configurations across 3 different body lengths give this French model more options than most rivals can offer. There are other strong selling points too. The EMP2 platform is more sophisticated than the cruder van-like underpinnings that rivals use, so you get a more absorbent, more car-like standard of ride. And that helps the handling too, which is less LCV-like than you might expect. Other stuff we like that's lacking on rival models includes the split-opening rear tailgate and the foot-operated side-door electric sliding mechanism. The problems with this MPV, such as they are, tend also to be things that apply to rivals in the segment. You'll get plenty of body roll if you're running late and you start throwing the Citroen around. And if you want to take the rear seats out, you need to be strong of back if you can't enlist someone else to help you. Otherwise, this Citroen's main issue probably lies in the fact that much the same package and much the same price is available badged as either a Peugeot Traveller or a Toyota Proace Verso, which means that if you like the design of this people carrier, and we can see why you might, then a decision to go for this Citroen version will probably be heavily influenced by the kind of deal being offered. Value, though, continues to be a brand strong point, just like MPV design, in fact. Some things never change.